Hi, everybody. Jen Hatmaker here, your host of the For the Love podcast. Oh, man. Woo! Buckle up, you guys. Welcome to the show because we're in a series called For the Love of Facing Your Fears. You guys, today's conversation with today's guest was just super special. And we went, well, let's look, 40 minutes longer than we had planned to. Because the conversation was so rich and so full. And when I tell you we barely scratched the surface, we're talking about a topic near and dear and really personal to me today, which is facing the fear of questioning or even departing in some way or in a lot of ways from a faith that you've always known. Now, you guys that have been with me in our little For the Love community here for a while have seen the very, very windy, very up and down relationship I've had with faith systems, organized religion, all of it. And I've asked hard questions. I've definitely challenged my own beliefs, reshaped, reevaluated, reexamined. So trust me when I say anyone who is in that space doing this hard and sometimes scary work of testing the boundaries of faith, you have me standing firmly behind you and cheering you all the way. So you are going to love today's episode. Like, just get somewhere where you can listen and pay attention. My 90s Christian pals listening will certainly remember the contemporary Christian band Caedmon's Call. Of course you do. With their sort of innovative folk alternative rock sound. There was just nobody like Caedmon's at the time in the genre. Just a soundtrack for like that generation, truly. So Derek Webb was an absolute pillar of the band, songwriter, lead guitarist. Caedmon's, they got 10 GMA Dove Award nominations, 3 wins, 6 #1 Christian radio hits for about a decade. And then in 2003, Derek left Caedmon's Call to pursue a solo career. And oh gosh, I don't even know how to lead into this incredible conversation. One thing I love about Caedmon's, they were dubbed a thinking Christians band. And Derek's lyrics in particular contributed to that. Highly introspective, led to lots of deeper conversations. And then certainly all of his music post Caedmon's is in that space. And so I know it's kind of a buzzword now, but before the term deconstruction was kind of a part of the zeitgeist, this was Derek's experience. Like, he trailblazed this for us in a lot of ways, and he reexamined his own faith in a pretty like impactful way. And so he doesn't identify with some of those, well, certainly like the evangelical label anymore, even really Christian. But, well, you'll just have to hear him. It's hard. He's got room for like spiritual mystery. I love to hear him talk about this, actually. And so, oh gosh. So Derek's shaken things up, which I understand. In fact, I'm not going to steal thunder from the conversation, but just this year at the Dove Awards, he made quite a splash. He attended wearing a dress along with queer singer Grace Baldridge, drag queen Flamy Grant. If you were anywhere near Christian social media, you saw this. We talk all about that. And it's really actually a lovely conversation and kind of a beautiful, inclusive intention around that peaceful disruption. We talk about everything, evolution of beliefs. We talk about the Christian music industry. We talked about the label Christian as a marketing term. We talk about what it means to fail, what it means to re-examine, what we keep, what we hold. You guys, this episode is packed. It's just packed. This could have been 3 episodes, which is why it's longer than normal, but I promise you worth every single second. So literally, without any further ado, let me tee this up for you. Please, I hope you love this conversation with the delightful Derek Webb as much as I did. Well, everybody get excited. It is Derek Webb. right here on the show.
Don't get too excited,
No, get a little
but just a
excited.
little bit excited.
I'm so happy to meet you. I'm so happy to see you.
Well, we have so many friends in common, and I'm such a
We do.
huge admirer of yours and have been for so long that I could not be more thrilled to get to talk to you. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah,
It's a nice thing to say. So, okay. For my listeners who didn't already know, I filled them in, with kind of
sure.
the bullet points
Mm,
of your career arc and your story, but we're going to fill in
great.
here. So let's roll it way back to begin.
Sure.
Can you just talk a little about how you got started in music? Um, Kind of your on-ramp to
Yep.
Caedmon's. And then even I'd like to hear a little bit about who you were during those
Hmm.
kind of big band years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I have always played music. It's like the only thing. I actually that's an old narrative. It's not the only thing I know how to do, but it's like the
Mm,
main thing. It was my early thing I found. So in all those adolescent
mm,
years, early pre-adolescent years where kids are figuring themselves out or supposed to be figuring themselves out and there are set things that are assigned value that are being looked for and things like academics, social, sports. It's like, certain things, there are certain categories, there's needles you want to have moving when you're a kid. None of those needles budged for me. I was terrible at
mm,
school. I was awkward socially. I
mm,
couldn't play sports. I'm short. Like I just couldn't do, none of that was working for me. But my mom is a tremendous musician, incredible
mm,
pianist, trained, but also plays by ear and is just a real genius. And so I thankfully got something from her and found music really early. So I was probably like 7, 8 years old. It was early enough though, or I should say it was late enough for me to already have been feeling the pressure of like, what is my thing? Like, I'm not good at
mm.
anything. I'm not good at any of the stuff all these other kids are good at. I don't have a thing. And so when I found music by way of a guitar buried in a case under all my mom's clothes in a closet somewhere, that she's a piano player. She wanted to learn how to play guitar because she loved Dolly Parton so much, and she and Dolly grew up in a similar part
Sure.
of Tennessee. But so she had this guitar, but she couldn't play it, and she was frustrated. It was in the so I dug it out and found it and kind of tuned it up, and even as a 7, 8, 9 year old, like kind of figured it out and kind of started to teach myself. And anyway, so once I found that, that was like my that was like my North Star. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I finally have something that makes sense to me, that is fun, that I
Mm,
enjoy, I have opportunity to do. Um, and that's where that kind of started. And I've said that it kind of music kind of kept me out of trouble over the years because by the time I got to high school, I had more than logged my 10,000 hours and I had worked really hard at it. I was failing out of school as a result, but I had a focus, I had a vision, about this.
mhm.
And I remembered that one of the early bands I was in high school, we were playing some party. Probably would have been a freshman, and uh, folks were coming up, and I mean there was obviously alcohol at the party, but it was terrible alcohol. It was like wine coolers. It was
Sure.
like a hangover in a bottle. And somebody right before we played, and I took this and have always taken it really seriously, and especially when I was young because I was like, this is what I have, so I need to maximize. I need to make the most of it. I need to like absolutely reckless abandon into this thing, and so somebody gave me a wine cooler like right before we played, and I guzzled down some of it, and it was and I'd never really had alcohol. So when we went
Mm,
to play, I played terribly. I was sloppy. It was terrible. And I remember after that party thinking, I will never touch alcohol again. And it's a good thing I didn't drop acid and have like a Steve Jobs, Jimi Hendrix revelation moment. And because
yeah.
then I would have been a drug addict after that. Because the thing was like, whatever propels
Mm,
this music thing stays. Whatever is an anchor on it goes. And
mm,
so I literally did not drink another drop of alcohol until after I was 21
yeah.
and I was a very rebellious kid, but music was the thing that kept me focused. So it's like if something helps the music, then it stays. If something's a distraction
Mm,
from it, it's gone. And I'm so grateful to have had that
right.
during all those years because I could have gotten into so much more trouble. And so, anyways, late high school, I had a great pal who I went to high school with, Aaron Tate, who I did not know was a musician or songwriter, but he went to college in Texas and met a guy named Cliff Young. And Cliff was the heir to the Second Baptist Church
Oh yeah.
dynasty in Houston.
Oh yeah.
His
I
dad,
have a
his,
link to that
do
dynasty.
you? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people do. So his dad, it was and is actually still the head senior pastor at Second Baptist Church. And so Cliff and Aaron met, and Cliff, he and I are very different, and we're super close still. And he met Aaron. Aaron is an unbelievable songwriter, was, always has been an incredible songwriter. I didn't know this about Aaron at the time. He met Cliff. Cliff overheard Aaron singing some of his own songs in his dorm room and just overheard it and was like, hey man, like, those are really cool songs. Did you write did you write those songs? And Aaron was like, yeah, I wrote
Yeah.
them. And Cliff was like, would you do anything with that? Or do you do a band or anything? Aaron's like, no. And Cliff's such an opportunist. And he said, so like, do you want to start a band and we could play your songs? And Aaron was like, nope. And Cliff, and that's where a normal person would have stopped. Not Cliff Young.
Sure.
Not Cliff Young. Cliff then said, well, could I start a band without you and play your songs? And Aaron thought about that. Yeah. And Aaron thought about it and he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. And Cliff was like, awesome. Okay, so now, as though Aaron had not given him enough at that point, he was like, cool, so can you introduce me to some musicians for my new band? Because I don't know any other. And so Cliff
Oh,
was
God.
introduced to me because Aaron and I had been friends. So Aaron was like, hey, I
Yeah.
met this guy and he wants to start a band. And he knew I was into like acoustic kind of folk rock, Indigo Girls-y kind of stuff. And so
Sure.
he introduced me and Cliff. We met. I heard Aaron's songs through Cliff. And I had plans at the time to do other music stuff, but because I'd been in bands my whole life up to that point.
Yeah.
But I heard Aaron's songs, and these would have been all the early Caedmon songs. But I heard some of
Of
those
course.
in their I mean, like Cliff. I was one of the first people that Aaron allowed Cliff to play these songs for, and so I heard the songs and was like, "Well, this is what I've been waiting for." I knew like the songs were so good, and so we started the band right then and there. We had the great benefit. It gets very Malcolm Gladwellian from here because we had the great benefit of Cliff being the youngest son of the biggest pastor in
Yeah.
Houston. They had a giant church complex with a recording studio in it. So
Yeah.
in the very early 90s, we had access to recording our music, and most bands didn't. You had to have a record deal. No one could afford, like the tools weren't democratized the way they are now where anybody can record music. So we had all these great benefits. And we had, anytime we wanted to put out a little cassette or a little disc or whatever, we could go play at Cliff's dad would let us play a song at their services, and it was like
Sure.
3 services with 8,000 people apiece in them. So
Totally.
yeah, we'd sell out every time of everything we had, and so it just got us going. So that gave us a real home base. And then that wound up being my career for 10 years. We wound up getting a record deal with Warner. And that's like its own long story. I'm trying to, believe it or not, I'm trying to keep this brief for you. And,
No, I'm fascinated. Don't truncate it.
Oh, well, I mean, because there's, you know how it is. There's amazing little random intricate stories that go with every pivot point.
Of course.
And there are and so for us, there was a handful of these, but we got signed, and then we, I don't know, I guess, like it was fantastic. It was like these new friends that I found. It was everything I wanted all in one package. It was like best friends, great music, and a job. And that was basically from kind of 92 is when we started the band,
Yeah.
same year I graduated high school,
Yeah, same.
until the early 2000s. And okay, so you asked like, who was I during that time? I'm so glad
Yeah.
you asked that question because so I had barely gotten out of high school. I was kind of a closeted intellectual, I think, a little bit. Like I'm a thinker, but I didn't see myself that way at that time. And so we had a lot of friends who were who were either in college, out of college, in seminary, and they were giving us
Of
books,
course.
and they were telling us what to read, and they were, and we were playing at a lot of these big colleges. We were mainly a college band, and so I probably because I had this chip on my shoulder about, feeling dumb my whole life and being told that I, wasn't smart or smart but can't apply himself. What can a child do with that information?
Completely.
Nothing. And so, anyways, I started reading, and we had like kind of these guys who were kind of handing us stuff and saying, hey, this is really cool stuff. And initially I kind of heard what they were saying and didn't like it, didn't sound right to me theologically. And so I was like, nah, I'm not down with that. So I started reading the books they were giving us, and it kind of converted me to a very conservative theological system associated with kind of the Reformation and Calvin. And it was, that's where I kind of found myself. And I just fell all the way down that rabbit hole. And so for during those years in Caedmon's, I was studying a lot of theology, and it was really all of it in that lane, in that very kind of narrow space. And I can tell you, Jen, that those were easily my least loving years when I was studying that stuff. And I'm not blaming the brand of theology. It was, first of all, I was young. Second of all, I was getting all the theology and none of the ethics. And so if theology is how do we think about God? What are our thoughts about God? Ethics is how, therefore, do we treat people? And I had none of the second thing. So I just was weaponizing it. And mostly against myself, but also against everybody I would meet. And I was writing it very strongly into Caedmon's Call lyrics, which is why some of those songs are extremely complicated for me now, 30 years later, 25 years later. And and I didn't really, even until after I got out of the band 10 years later, and I'm actually still in the band. Caedmon's Call as a band is like Hotel California. Like, you check out whenever you want, but you never leave this band. And because we literally just re-recorded a record last year and played 2 shows at the Ryman this year. So it's like, no, it's not over. It's never over. And I love these people. And but the point was, my first 10 years in the band, that's really where I was the whole time. That's what I was doing with my thoughts about God. I was weaponizing them. And so they were rough years. I didn't see them as rough, but looking back, it's embarrassing, and it's sad to me that's what I did with it. But it's natural, I think, because especially when it's like God, it's like when it's something when the stakes are that high and you think you have some kind of special knowledge, or you think you have a perspective, or even just words, like a language other people don't have, it's really hard not to, it's very easy to justify bad behavior morally, because you're like, it's the right thing to do because these people are so wrong. I have to fix them. They have to come around to my language and my vocabulary, or else they're wrong. And I don't want to see these people be wrong and go to hell. So you justify all the worst behavior. You like build the kingdom with all the devil's tools. And that's what I was doing all during the 90s and early 2000s. It was, so that brings us to kind of about 20 years ago, like when I left the band.
I understand every word you just said.
I know you do.
You and I are the exact same age.
Yes.
And Caedmon's was a huge part of the artistic canon I collected in the 90s. And of course, as you might imagine, I married young and we went straight into youth ministry. Isn't that the path? I was a teacher, by the way.
That is the path.
Very acceptable vocation. And
amazing.
So, I mean, those were the songs in our ears, the songs in our youth group. I grew up with you.
Yeah.
And my cognitive dissonance also began, but not until my 30s.
Interesting.
I also, like you, in my 20s, just felt like, well, lucky me to know all this.
That's exactly right.
I have the knowledge.
Right.
And I just need to make sure everybody else knows it.
Gets it, yeah. Which seems to go very much in the face of something like Ephesians 2:8-9. Nothing you can boast about, total gift, nothing you can earn, nothing you can. And yet here I was like, well, how lucky am I that I found this?
Same.
And so.
Same. And it's hard to think back on those years and some of the things that I said. But it really was genuinely well-intentioned.
I know. I totally understand.
It's what I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't come up in a faith system that encouraged curiosity.
Right.
That just wasn't a part of the metric.
Right.
It was, obviously certainty
Absolutely
was rewarded. Also fun, small fact. Let's see, how old would I have been? Early 30s. The first place that I ever preached as a girl was at Second Baptist. I
Really?
know. We were serving on a church here in Austin at the time
Okay.
who was connected to the Young Empire.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
had come up through Second and
Yeah.
then Fellowship.
Yes, sure, sure,
And
sure.
so
Wow.
I
Wow.
preached on that big stage in that big church,
That's
all
cool.
three services.
That's cool.
When I say preach, though, the way I was introduced was that I was there to share with the ladies, and the men could peek over our shoulders. Literally, that's how I was introduced.
The whole thing. I mean, we shouldn't even start because like
I
that, we could
know.
spend the whole hour just, yeah, I
We
don't,
could.
yeah. Anyways, I mean, that's
Let's talk
incredible.
about,
Incredible though.
let's get to let's pick up the baton where you left
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So 10 years in Caedmon's.
Yeah.
Talk about your decision, number one, to leave the band. And then, of course, you sort of moved into solo space.
Yeah.
She Must and Shall Go Free,
Yeah.
which, created a bit of a ruckus.
I guess it did.
And
Yeah.
so what it did was it opened up conversations
Yeah.
inside that space that you had been in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of us were having these, of course,
Absolutely.
but we didn't know where to go.
Right. And that's why, and
I'd like to, yeah, let's hear about that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and movements like need soundtracks and that can tend to be a really important part. And every so often the stars align a little bit in terms of, I think that there were a lot of people having those conversations around that time. I think there were a handful of things going on. For me, it was also a handful of things that kind of worked into that. Mainly the thing that pulled me out of Caedmon's. I never wanted to be a solo artist. Never had a vision to be a solo artist. I loved being part of an ensemble. I loved doing this with my friends and spreading it out. And it was so much fun. It was so easy. And it was, and for those 10 years, it was actually fantastic. It worked really well. But what had happened was in those first couple of years of the 2000s, this new movement had started. And it's very much, not only is it in bloom, but I think all the petals have fallen off at this point, but is worship product, worship music as a genre, as a subgenre, without which you wouldn't have a song on the radio kind of thing. Like all the Christian bands starting in the early 2000s, and we were kind of right on we had front row seats because I think a lot of it, the fuses were lit at the label where we were, which was Essential. It was Third Day, Jars of Clay, Plum, All Star United, and us. And
Gosh,
Third Day had put out.
You just described the 90s to me.
Exactly. Yeah, they were doing really well. Essential did really well in the 90s, I guess. But so Third Day had put out this Offerings record, which was a quirky record that the label wasn't behind and didn't understand why they wanted to do. But Mac and those guys were very organically and naturally integrating worship music into their sets live. At the end of their shows, they would lead music, and it was a real special part of what they were doing with their community. And they went to the label and said, we want to put out these kind of songs. They're not our own songs, or they're just choruses, but we want to put it out. And some of it's live, and the label's like, we're not interested because there's no precedent for that, and it's not going to sell. And they said, well, you know what? If you want to do it, if you want to pay for it yourself, give it to us. We'll drop it out, but we're not going to promote it. It wound up being, I mean, cut to the chase, it wound up being the band's like biggest album ever. And it was a very tight corner that the whole industry kind of pivoted around. It wasn't just them. Michael W. Smith was doing it as well, but suddenly bands were coming out with worship albums, and that changed kind of everything in the early 90s. So there was immediately pressure on every band to put out your worship record. And so like literally Essential, there was like a memo that went out to every band. It was like, all right, start figuring it out because Third Day is crushing it. And now, Jars, we need your worship record. Caedmon's, work on your worship record. And that wasn't anything that wasn't part of what we did as a band really. Yeah. I mean, did we know how to do it? Of course we did. And we did it back at Second some. But there weren't these hard lines about worship music and other Christian music or whatever. And all of it, I'll save my spiel about Christian music till if it comes up. But the point is, that wasn't natural for us. And so we were feeling some of that pressure around that same time. I had spent 10 years in a Christian band. You see behind the curtain, you kind of see how the sausage is made when it comes to like what's really going on with Christian radio and these big churches and Christian festivals and things where you kind of see all the behind the scenes. And I had some things I really wanted to write about that, and Caedmon's early in our career was very risk tolerant. Like that was a lot of our MO. I mean, we really were trying to put language to things we were seeing and experiencing, and no one else seemed to be making art about. And so there was no music for people like us, our age, going through what we were going through. So we were trying to make the music we needed. And after 10 years, we kind of figured out how things work, and we kind of got comfortable, and we weren't really doing that as much. And the platform gets high, and you kind of get into the platform maintenance business, and you kind of get into, you get out of the get on the platform and say things that get the thing knocked over business. And so I was coming.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, I know you don't. Boy, that's your whole, that's your entire brand, basically. I love it. And so, so I was writing some new songs though, and taking them to the band, and the band was like, well, yeah, that's a really good song, but you can't play that at our shows, because they were trying to protect a thing. And I get that. 10 years of hard work and a lot of careers wrapped up in what we were doing. And so I was in the position to say, well, either I don't play these new songs that I really think they seem important to me. I feel like I really want to play them. I can't do it on my own and do Caedmon's, because it's already too much of a job. It's too big of a job. So that's where I was like, well, like we talked about it, and it felt kind of like a little church plant situation. It was like, well, go off and do it, and we love you and support you. And so and you're right. So I kind of came out of that situation with kind of a contingency of Caedmon's fans that came with me. So it was a very unlikely debut record, my first record, and it did have some tricky material on it and some controversial stuff for that time. But it got pushed out and supported because I had that wind at my back after 10 years of Caedmon's. So I was able to do it. And then it just spoiled me and made me think I could always be that way. And so now here I am 20 years later, and I'm still doing that. I'm spoiled into thinking that I can write songs about things no one else is writing songs about. And that's like kind of my thing now. So
I love it.
Yeah. So that's how I got started.
You had a real North Star back then, though, that turned out to be right. So because you mentioned it and I stuck a pin in it, let's hear your spiel on Christian music. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so here's the thing is, you see enough of it, and you experience enough of it, and you just observe it for long enough to think a little more critically about it. And you come to very clear conclusions. And this was mine, that the word Christian, when applied to anything other than a human being, is a marketing term. That's all that it is. It's a marketing term. It cannot mean what it means when people say it about people. In other words, but just because something is rubber stamped as Christian, now it's Christian music, Christian education, Christian retail, Christian breath mints, Christian festival, whatever it is, does not make it inherently right, true, good, beautiful, redeemed, inherently. In other words, all this Christian music you hear on your local Christian radio station is not the only music there will be in heaven by virtue of it being the Christian music. That is not, and yet when you talk about people, that seems to be the way people mean it, is the Christian people are the ones who will be in heaven. And so the Christian art must be the art that's going to be in heaven. That cannot be what it means. It's someone just decides, who wants to buy this? Okay, well then that's how we need to position it in the market. That's what it is. And I'm not even saying that it's not helpful. It's extremely helpful. The word Christian as a marketing term. I use it as a marketing term all the time. But it can't mean, and so therefore it's just a fiction. There is no such thing as Christian education. There's no such thing as Christian radio stations. Radio stations that say they advertise as safe for the whole family. The thing is, like, and Christian retail, it's like, come in and consume at will. Turn your powers of discernment off, bring in your kids. Everything we have here is pre-vetted for your spiritual nourishment. Just come in and take it. Where I learned that was not true was, and I'm not trying to call names out here, but I am, because this is what sparked my solo career. The Prayer Jabez is literally what sparked my solo career, because Bruce Wilkinson, who wrote
there's a blast from the past.
Yeah, I know this is what's happening. His book was a multi-million-dollar bestseller. Every Christian retail store had Prayer Jabez end caps on every aisle, selling the Prayer Jabez, companion Bible, the Prayer Jabez, soundtrack that a bunch of our friends were on. And when I read it, and when I heard Bruce speak at some of these big conventions we were doing together, and I heard him talk about it, and I was like, I don't know, this doesn't ring, like, to say here's an obscure prayer from the Old Testament, it's prayed one time by an obscure character, we don't know how God answered it, if God answered it, we don't know anything about it other than here it is, And yet here's a guy making promises in a book that regardless of how you feel about anything else spiritually, if you pray it every day for 30 days, it's on the back of the book, it says that the prayer God can't not answer. He has to answer it. And he'll expand your territory. And I heard him making these promises to Christian retailers right in front of me. Like, if you pray this prayer, the next year when you come back here, I want to hear your stories about how God expanded your store. You're going to be buying the store next door and expanding into there. Your revenue is going to double. And I was just like, I don't know, y'all. Is this really what the people at the top of this whole industry are buying into? And it just didn't sit right with me. And so literally the night that this happened, when we heard him speak and we played right after him, it was really an awkward situation. I wrote a song called Wedding Dress, literally that night in a hotel in Atlanta after the convention, and showed it to the band. They were like, you can't play this, because it was about Ezekiel 16 and it talks about the church as a whore and that whole thing. But I was looking at the room thinking, like, look at us. Like, it looked like a Billy Graham crusade, but I expected all these people who were the people in charge of putting stuff in Christian stores to hear his spiel and be like, no. Like, don't tickle our ears with this. Like, but the whole place wept and got up and came to the front like an altar call. And I was like, I was just really disappointed. And I was like, okay. And it sparked something about art has this interesting thing, and it doesn't have to do this, but it's one of the few areas of culture left that can sit in kind of a prophetic space and can speak truth to power. Art is one of the few places that can do it. And it's not just Christian art, God knows. It's all art. I mean, art has this potential. You don't have to do that. But there are times when artists do speak with a kind of a prophetic voice. A lot of times they don't know they're even doing it. Hip hop does it mainly and has really owned the prophetic space for the last 25 years easily. Before that, it was Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and, Woody Guthrie. And it literally, I feel like those people handed the baton right to hip hop artists. But that's where the prophetic voices are, and they're speaking truth to culture and they're challenging culture. And I had one of those moments where I was like, I need to say something. Like, I need to write something. Yeah. I wrote that song, and it wound up being the first of my solo material. I didn't know. I thought I was writing a Cademan song. But it's what sparked my solo career. And ever since then, I've really tried to instill in people, like, listen, people are trying to sell you certainty. They're trying to sell you safety. It's not that simple. You have to learn how to discern things. You have to learn how to think for yourself. It's so interesting how it's one of those weird features of Christian culture that they don't really want people to think for themselves. They don't want people to think critically. They want people to lean on a false certainty and then never think about it again and just kind of receive the talking points. It's not ironically the way that political movements work. They hand talking points down from the top. Everybody learns the words and everybody sticks to it without question.
Sure. And it's a predictable mechanism.
And it is the way it works, and you can control people that way. And but I think there's something I'm still hold space for there to be some real mysterious spiritual reality that is not about controlling people and is not about the mechanics of politics and cultural phenomenon and fades or fashion and fads. I think there really is something to be discerned. You can't be certain about it, but I still hold space for it. Even I don't identify as an evangelical at this point. I don't have any certainty about any of that stuff, but I still do believe. I can't not believe or hold space for the possibility. But man, so much conventional religion makes it so hard to see that or access that, because they advertise what they're doing as that. And so that's why people try it, get devastated, disappointed, and hurt, and then throw all the water out with all the baby out with the bathwater. And it's hard. And it's so much of why you're here doing what you're doing is to give voice to the people who are on the other side of that and trying to figure out what now.
I feel like we could talk about this for so many hours.
Yeah.
I'm in that same space, and that's been my same arc. And I wonder if you could parse out a little more, maybe what was going on internally for you, spiritually for you. What were you thinking about? What were you observing that was disrupting the story?
Yeah.
And how did that feel to you? Because, okay, I don't want to lead the witness.
No, that's great. No,
but it feels a certain way when you come up through evangelicalism And then all of a sudden you're pressing really hard on the sacred forms.
Right.
It's no mystery how the community responds to it.
Right.
Belonging is easily revoked. That's the
Right.
punishment.
That's right.
But there's also an internal
Yeah.
just rub. I
Yes.
don't know. I just want to hear you talk about
Yeah.
your faith during that space.
Yeah.
I don't identify evangelical either.
Yeah.
But would you say, okay, no, I'm going too much.
No, I love
it. Push that one over here.
No,
Let's start with what I started.
Yes. We have way too much shorthand to not jump ahead. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well done. And, so at that time, I can tell you that I probably, because I'm as I said, I'm like a raging Enneagram 5, like I'm a real thinker. And so I really responded to and loved what I could understand about my spirituality at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And so and it's no wonder for that reason that I fell so in love with the mechanics of it and the theology of it. But what I think I loved about it was I loved it as far as I could understand it and as far as I could therefore control it, have some control over it, because it was math. It was like, no, but this is how this works. And so if something unexpected happens, no, I have an answer for that. Here's how it works. I've got a framework. And so and for that reason at that time, it was very real and it was mostly a comfort to me. And I can tell you that I did experience it as a real spiritual practice at that time. I did. I think what was happening is early 90s, there started to be kind of a new movement. Well, let me stop and say, in every industry, in every big cultural movement, there's like a cycle to it. And there's the early kind of organic, spontaneous cycle where a thing happens, a new spark and something happens. And then as it starts to grow people hear about it and people get caught up in it. And in as far as it's real and organic and resonant and relevant, it starts to kind of grow. But the bigger it gets, it starts to institutionalize, and then cracks start to form. And then on those cracks, there's new opportunities for new sparks and disruption. This is the cycle every industry goes through. This is the cycle every cultural movement goes through. And Christianity, even Western evangelical Christianity, was going through one of those cycle pivots around that time. There were cracks. And what was happening, the spark in those cracks was, and you'll know this, was like the emergent church kind of movement. There were people who were wanting to think in a new way, in a new open way, in a new creative way about spirituality. Like, leave behind some of the old language, let's find some new language. And that was happening, and as a byproduct, it was getting very social. It was getting very what was it, like the social justice gospel is what a lot of people started to talk about it as, and a lot of the more conservative
Shane Claiborne years.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Shane. Yeah, and like Brian McLaren and Jim Wallace and Sojourners and a lot of those people. And they were doing a lot of social work. And what's interesting, it was getting back to the roots, in my opinion, the roots of the Western church. The whole civil rights movement came out of Black gospel churches. And all of that organizing came out of those communities. And the church had always been a part of that to some degree at different times. And suddenly there was this new thing that was happening, and it was expressed in a very social way. And I was resonating with that. And a lot of my friends were resonating with that. And that is when ethics started to show up. And I started to realize that was the piece, the yin yang I was missing was, I've been so obsessed on obsessed on my language about God that I forgot to apply it to the way I behave in the world, the way I treat other people, which is ethics. And I realized, oh no, how did I miss that I am, as I stand before you, the ringing cymbal, the clanging gong of I've got all the right words and none of the love, none of the fruit. And you can see it all over my life. I'm angry and and so when I found that, I really loved it, resonated with it. I was like, oh, this is the logical next conclusion. This is the conclusion that makes sense of what you would do with all of this. And so that kind of suddenly put me over, which is when I was starting my solo career, it put me over in a category I didn't really choose, but over into that kind of emergent church kind of spot. And it was kind of pulling me forward a little bit. And so I started to kind of come awake to some of that. And I started writing songs about more political things and more social things. And it kind of took me over that way. here's another thing, and I'm going to skip ahead a little just for the sake of time,
Mm-hmm.
but another thing that happened, and I think this is necessary in a lot of my friends, and I'm curious you'll resonate with this as well, is a ways after that, in the early 20 teens, I went through some very major personal failure in my life and in my marriage. I went through some major failure, and that I was not ready for. I was so preoccupied with, I don't know what it was, but I didn't have safe, I was not known by anybody in my life. I didn't have safe
Yeah.
people in my life that
Yeah.
I could go to if things got out of hand, or if I realized I couldn't control like what was happening and things were kind of getting out of control. I didn't have people, and I didn't have
Mm.
community. I had the appearance of it, but I didn't have it. I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I wasn't letting people in. I wasn't pursuing it. And so I got a divorce. I was divorced in almost 10 years ago. And something about going through that and the things that it's like you don't really learn anything from success. You learn hardly anything. All you do is heap more expectation on yourself to succeed more. But when you fail, you don't have to do this, but often people do. It's the quick instinct is you pull that car over, you pump the brakes, you pull that car over, and you're like, what happened back there? What is going on? How did this happen? How did I wind up here?
Yeah.
And you take stock, and that's, and if you've got good people around you, and you can manage to find some quick, kind of healthy response to that, then you'll learn everything you can about yourself, about your circumstances, about your story, and figure out why in the world this is not me. This is not this is not how I see myself. And how in the world could this have happened? I need to figure, apparently there's a lot of things I don't know about myself, and I need to sort this out. And that was a revelation to me. And there were a handful of years that I really kind of went very inward, and I went through some very intense, very good, very consistent therapy, and found and built a community where I'd never had one. And now, I mean, if anything happened this morning, I've got 24 safe men that I could reach out to, and obviously my wife and but like people who I have intimacy, and know me, and I have a shorthand, and they know my story, they know everything, and it's like, I have those people now. And, but I didn't have any of that. And so I kind of had to rebuild at almost 40. I had to rebuild a whole life and reckon with, the fallout of what I had, at least my part of the responsibility of, some real hurt I caused a lot of people who I love, the people I love more than anybody in the world. And it humbled me, and it caused me, it kind of caught me up in terms of my emotional health and things that had apparently just because I had had so much success coming out of the band and my solo career, everything had been pretty easy for me. I hadn't had any big, no big wrecks that I had gotten in, but boy, that was the one. And it really fundamentally changed me. It did. And I came out of that a completely different, I don't remotely relate to, I am exactly that person, but I don't relate remotely to my behaviors and my choices and the way I was living my life. And so anyways, that was a huge corner that I went around as well.
Yeah.
And I think and I bring that up now because, first of all, because it's important in my story, and everything, all of my gratefulness, all of my perspective, all of the life that I have and love now, all of the amends that I have made, everything about the life I now have that I love and am grateful for is a result of, I can line of sight back to that major failure that I went through. And the other thing that happened around that time was it kind of called my spirituality, it called it for all its chips. And it was like, okay, let's see if this thing can bear the weight of the major life crisis and the major failure. And is it really comforting? When you lean all your weight really on it, when we're not just practicing, but it's showtime now, what does it really mean? And how does it really feel? And I it's like you can't test the strength of the boat you're in while you're in it, because you are in every way incentivized to believe this boat can hold you if it's the only thing
That's a
between
good
you and the
analogy.
raging water. And so not until you're thrown out of that boat for a split second can you get some quick perspective on it. And in free fall, I looked down at that little boat and I was like, bro, is that what I've been on? That's what's been between me and the water all
Wow.
this time? And do I even
Yeah.
need anything between me and the water also? Can I not swim? And so there was a lot going on there,
Yeah.
and it caused a lot of what you might call deconstruction. Although it's a shorthand I don't mind, but it's
What does it even
it
mean
gets a bad
anymore?
rap. Yeah, if 10 people define a
Yeah.
word 10 ways, stop using that word. But
Yeah, that's right.
just that audit of your presumptions about invisible reality, that thing that needs to happen regularly, always. I had not done it in a long time. And boy, did I ever do it during that time. And so that was just kind of the amendment on the bill. It just kind of went in with all the life rethinking and rebuilding. The spirituality piece went
Let
with
me
it.
pause
Yeah.
because I'd love to hear you talk about that audit a little bit. And as you observed the boat
Yeah.
from a distance,
Yeah.
at a point where you were liberated, for better or for worse,
Yeah.
to be honest
Yeah. Yep.
and to have
You
some
have no
real
choice at that point.
self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. What stayed and what went?
Yeah. And it's a great question. I'll tell you, initially, everything had to go. Just
I understand
for
that.
me, and everyone's process is going to be super different about this, but for me, I needed the only way I felt like I could trust what was going to remain is, it's like what Sting said, you love somebody, set them free. So it's like I needed for all of it to go and then see what showed back up and
Yeah.
what seemed necessary and what seemed real. And I needed to kind of take stock. So it was one of those, like, okay, at first I'm going to let all of it, I'm going to just pretend like none of it's real and I don't know any of
Okay.
it. And I'm going to see how long I can go. It's like that thing that people say about like, if aliens came to Earth and just had to observe the way life works and observed people and observed history and observed, how long would it take them maybe to get to the point where they're like, oh, and then here's the point where there's an invisible triune God who sent his only son, who's also himself, and died for the sins of humanity because they wrecked in the garden. And like, at what point would they come up with that story? And that be necessary to explaining how everything works and why. And so for me, I was like, all right, I'm that alien. I'm just going to come in and for a long time, I was like, I'm not even going to presume there's a spiritual layer to all this. I'm going to presume that all this can be completely explained rationally, and maybe I don't need any of that. And so it was from there, because I thought, because from here, anything that comes back, that shows back up, I feel like I know I can trust that, because I didn't invent it. I'm off of God's PR team at this point. Like, I'm not, I'm not jumping across the ravine. I need it to come to me. Like, I'm Lazarus in the grave. I'm waiting to hear my name, but I'm laying here until then. And what else can I possibly do? Like, that's it. And yet I realized community is insanely important. Not that the church or Christianity owns, that they don't get the trademark on that, but I really missed and needed that. I needed people. I needed to find excuses to be around people with whom I had nothing in common, other than maybe our acknowledgement of our humanity and our mortality. And so for me, that early on, that became kind of like groups that I could go and in a safe way, I could go and talk through things I was processing, and it became, therapy groups, and it became, but that was essential. And then after that, when kind of the hot red center of, the blast, when I was out far enough to be in a recovery about it, I was like, okay, now I just need to really put together, I need to find my friends. I need to find my people. And it's remarkable, the people you meet when that's the first and main thing that they hear about you. It's like the opposite of the way most friendships work. Most of the time you meet somebody, have things in common, and then you find out terrible things way later, and then it's really tough and disappointing, maybe. But this way, it's like all the worst stuff came out first, and then as we learn good things about you, like, oh my God, you sail? I mean, we didn't, it
You
was
sail.
delightful, It
Yeah.
was like, but,
Yeah.
so that started to happen. Um, and a thing I never really experienced, and I'm not blaming the religion, I'm not blaming, but
Mm,
gratitude. Like I was not really grateful. I was not thankful in my
mm,
life. I took all of it for granted. And what I didn't take for granted, thought I deserved and earned. And it made sense that I had it. But on the other side of that, and quiet, like, perspective. Like there were so many things that practices I found myself right back in, but I just needed to, and you see these things
mm,
all through culture and all through different religions. And you see some of these core things like both
mhm,
solitude and community. You need both in measure. Um, you know, a language and a practice of gratitude. But for me, it became, rather than having a moment and saying, oh, quietly, maybe silently, God, thank you for that. And I would just take the middleman out, and I would go straight to my wife and say, my God,
mm.
I'm so grateful that you're here, and thank you for loving me. And thank you for, like, so I just kept short receipts with that and went straight to those people and just talked about it out loud a lot. And in my music too, it started to change the way I
Mhm.
wrote. It started to, but yeah, and here's the thing. I'm still figuring my way through this. I still don't know, because I think there's something about that audit, that perennial, like I need to be in constant. That's why at this point I say my language I like is, I think belief is a strong word. I think
Mm,
the word belief, when you're believing something, it's like you're committed to it. And it's like you wind up with a confirmation bias that the
yeah.
information you receive, you make work, because this is the thing you're committed, you're believing this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah. Yeah.
makes
You're
you,
sitting in the boat.
yeah, exactly. You're in the boat. So
Hmm.
you need it to be able to hold you. And every little leak that pops up, you're like, no, that's isolated. That's no problem. But
Yeah.
it's like, you're not going to look at it, honestly anymore. And so for me, um, I kind of was like, you know what, maybe I'm not going to believe stuff. I mean, about my spirituality. So in other words,
Yeah.
about things that are invisible, like God,
Mm,
unknowable, like the future, about
mm.
those kind of things, I am post certainty. I am uncertain, which is the prerequisite of faith. It's not the enemy.
That's right.
And I want to remain till the day I'm dead, uncertain about all of it. It's the thing that keeps me running behind it. It's the thing that keeps me, it's propelling me forward. It's the thing that keeps me honest about it, because rather than believe stuff like cause and effect is a thing I think I believe in. I think I see that playing out consistently in call it karma, call it law of attraction, what you radiate, you attract. I think that's real. I see that, and regardless, but beyond cause and effect, I don't really know what else I'm believing at this point. But
Mm,
what I am doing, if I'm not believing, what am I doing? I'm hypothesizing. I hypothesize and I say, okay,
mhm,
this is what I think. It's my opinion. And I say in my opinion a lot in my life now. And I didn't say it for 30 years. I never said in my
mm.
opinion. I said, here's what's up,
That's right.
But now it's like, well, in my opinion, but you know what? If I get evidence to the contrary, life experience to the contrary, then I'm not holding that. Like, then maybe that's not what's up. And so I'm going to keep this thing very low to the ground, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna test it as I go. Now, I don't think deconstruction as a concept is like having one big meal a day. I don't think it's maybe the best thing for your system. I think because you have to go through losing your job and all your friends and it's like, I think let's do this let's do it like micro. Let's do it in a
Mm,
granular way. Let's like be thinking about it a little bit every day. And if there's a thing that we're saying, a way that we're understanding language, presumptions, hypotheses, opinions, whatever it is, and suddenly we're like, you know what? That's not making sense. That's not holding
mm,
water. That's not, you know what? Be open to letting that thing go this week and see how that feels. And let's
yeah,
hypothesize and let's bring the true stuff as it rings true with us as
mm,
let's drop it if it's not, let's pick it back up if it is. And that's kind of where I'm at. So
mm.
I'm still, I mean, I spent a year last year working at a church here in town. Now it's the
Mm.
most progressive church in Nashville, Grace Point Church, but
Sure.
But I love the people. I love what they're doing. I love the way they're like a halfway house, like both on and off ramp for conventional spirituality for people. I love the way what they do. So I wanted to help out and work with them, and so I did that. The whole time I was there, I would probably have identified as a hopeful agnostic, but
Yeah.
but yeah. So anyway, that's where I am now. Is I'm really figuring it as I go, and trying to write
Mm.
soundtrack for that, because now I
Yeah.
realize. So Jen, here's the funny thing, and I'm going to stop monologuing, but the funny thing is, for the 30 years or so, 25 years, 20 years that I spent making music, and what I was making, either Caedmon's or solo, was being identified often as ministry. That's what people were telling me I was doing and thanking me for.
Sure.
Thank you for your ministry. Your ministry. Oh, you have such a powerful ministry. And I was always like,
Mm.
I don't know. Like, that's not, I don't think that's what I'm doing. I don't show up every day to this job to win people over to my way of thinking. I show
Mm.
up to write the best songs I can and to play them as well as I can. I'm a vocational musician. I'm not a vocational minister. That's a whole other set of gifts, whole other deal. And yet that's what it appeared I was doing for all those years.
Yeah.
I did not see it that way. And yet here I am now, going into my 50s, going into my 30th year of this job, and at a place where I don't identify any particular way about my spirituality. And starting a couple of records ago, I absolutely consider what I do ministry. I am in full-time vocational ministry now. And the reason is because I realize one of the hardest things in deconstruction or whatever it is, or just going through hard life stuff, failure, whatever, any things I've experienced, is the isolation, is the feeling alone. I'm the only one.
Yes.
No one's ever been here before. No one's ever felt this. And it wreaks havoc on your life to feel so isolated and alone. And I realized if I have anything I can give, if I have anything that's worth my time, it is contributing in a way that makes people feel less alone. And writing soundtrack for where I've been in order that people could hear that and grab onto that and at least have something to accompany them. Because I wasn't finding a lot of it through my divorce. I wasn't finding a lot of it through my deconstruction. There was not a lot of music to help me and to go with me. And so I was like, well, that's my reason. That's what I need to do. And so I literally, when I'm writing songs, I think, what is the language people need who are like me or who might just be where I'm at now very soon or one day? What do they need to find? What's going to help them? What are their battle cries? What's their grief? What's their glory? What do they need? What language? It's like the hymn writers. It's like, what language do people need to confess things they wish to believe? That's what worship leaders do. That's their job description. And that's how I feel what I'm doing now. I'm writing soundtrack for people, and it's ministry to me. And I couldn't be more surprised, at this point. So
Totally.
anyway, I'm sorry I talk so long, but it's like, that's just
no. That's exactly why I have you on the show.
It's where that went though. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't life surprising?
It's, I couldn't be more.
I mean, if anybody would have told, let's say 25-year-old you and me,
yes,
that this is the conversation we're having in the lives that we're living.
Yes.
When we're about to turn 50.
Yes.
Wouldn't have believed it.
Absolutely
I'll tell you that.
Absolutely not.
I have to ask you about this because you have found an interesting space as a peaceful disruptor at the Dove Awards. You have to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to.
I won't even lead the witness.
Okay.
I'm going to volley that up to you.
Yes.
And
Great.
love to hear what that experience was like, what your decision process looked like, and what it was like to experience that, because you went right into the belly of the beast there.
Yes. Thank you for asking.
And then, yeah. Okay.
Okay. So here's the deal. One of the things that I had struggled with through my study of theology and through all those years was how the Bible interacted with people who I knew, and increasingly friends and family who were in the queer community. That was a thing that was always a rub for me of like, how does this stuff make sense, and does it make sense? And I had a real hard time with it. But it mattered a lot to me because it showed up in my life. I mean, my friends, my family, my loved ones, it was not a thing I could really avoid reckoning with and trying to square my beliefs at that time with. And I wrote about it over the years. I've written a decent amount about it. And what I knew is that I might not understand all this. I might not be able to put it all together theologically, but I have to believe that God is at least as loving as I am, and that I am not more loving than God is. I have to think that I'm not somehow better and more loving, more radically loving. Because when I look at Jesus, I see somebody who was so radically loving and welcoming that he literally was called by the names of the sins, so to speak, of the people he was hanging out with. He was happy to have his reputation ruined for the sake of being with people who had been marginalized and excluded from conventional spiritual spaces. That was his whole deal. And so I was like, I know where I think Jesus would be standing. If there's a line drawn, I don't wish for there to be, but if there is, and the church is the one drawing it, I have to think Jesus is on the other side of that line, and I need to be on the right side of that line. And that's always been a preoccupation of mine. So in the last few years, and so as a result, I just have a lot of great friends, very, very close friends, who are all over that map in terms of the queer community. And they're my favorite people. I mean, I love complicated people. I love people who know stuff because they've been through stuff. And those are my favorite people. I'm complicated in that way. My wife is that way. My kids are that way. And I just gravitate towards people who are like, ooh, you're complicated. I want to hear everything. Like, I want to hear you, Jen, are extremely complicated. And I love it. That's why you're so fascinating. And so anyways, naturally, relationships turns into work, turns into, we just do stuff together. So one of my great friends, who is a drag queen named Flamy Grant, which is the best drag name of all time for anybody who grew up in the
history.
90s. which is a homage. It's not it's not a jab. I mean, it's because of Flamy's deep love of Amy Grant's music.
Totally.
So anyways, Flamy's a great friend. I've known Flamy for a bunch of years, half a decade at least, that we've been friends and do work together. And Flamy sang on my new record. My record's called The Jesus Hypothesis, and we did a song called Boys Will Be Girls on that album, and made a music video for that song where Flamy puts me in drag. Now we did this early this year, and it was, it stirred up a little bit. All the all the typical outlets were upset about it and promoted me.
Of course.
Just as predictably as I hoped they would. And so anyways, but we did that. And then I sang a song on Flamy's record, Bible Belt Baby, which came out early this year, I believe. But it's interesting. Flamy and I have been in trouble together a lot lately. And it started with our video, and then it was Sean Foyt, who is kind of a MAGA worship leader, kind of, guy. He got real popular doing big outdoor worship events during the peak of COVID with no masks. And it was like super spreader events. A lot of photos with Trump, and that's kind of his space, and that's okay. I mean, that's his space. So he saw that Flamy and I were doing work together, and he must have known me from Caedmon's. And he was like, this just must be the end of days if we have Christian musicians partnering with drag queens. I mean, he was like, this is the end times, everybody. Yeah. And he was real upset. And Flamy, first of all, you don't step to a drag queen. Let me just tell you, you don't do that. Because a drag queen will handle you. They will handle you. They've been through enough to know how to handle.
Seriously.
And so
they're not fragile.
No. So Flamy turned this very public, kind of aggressive pursuit and judgment from Sean Foyt into, parlayed, judoed that into a number one Christian album, number one Christian single, which is the song we had together, because Flamy had used the Christian category of the marketing category of Christian. Her record was for Christians. That's who it's for. That's who she wanted to find it, because it's about growing up in the church. It's about, figuring yourself out in light of spiritual reality and that. And so that's the category it was released into. So when it blew up and got big, because Flamy has, 90 or 100,000 followers on TikTok, and was like, oh, Sean Foyt said that I don't matter. And Sean Foyt said, Sean literally said, nobody listens to you. Nobody cares about you. No one's going to care what you have to say. No. And Flamy basically said, is that right, friends? Is Sean right or Sean wrong? Can we prove him wrong? Does anybody care? Do any of you resonate with this? and basically number one album, number one single. It was historic. I mean, it was like, it'd never been done before.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I'm most grateful for in my whole career is being any part of putting a drag queen at the number one Christian charts, album and singles charts. Anyways, so then later this year, and we have a mutual friend in Semler, who is Grace Baldridge, who is a tremendous artist, incredible boy. If you want soundtrack for having grown up in the church, Semler's music, Maddie Zom's music, Flamy's music. There are some people doing some tremendous good work in the space right now. Really important voices. And so Flamy and Semler and I were just talking, and we were like, you know what? The Devil Words are coming up. They just sell tickets to it. Anybody can buy a ticket and go. And Semler had released their last two, I think, records into the Christian music category because that's who it's for. It's a marketing category. Flamy had released her album into the Christian music category, and I had released my most recent record, Jesus Hypothesis, into the Christian music category. I've got a song about the Apostle Paul on there. Who else is it for if not Christians? I mean, it's Christian music.
That's right.
Anyway,
that's niche.
Yeah, it's niche. I mean, that's me. Anyway, and so we were like, this is our space. This is like, these are our colleagues. Now, you might exclude us, and especially Flamy and Semler and others. You might exclude these people. You might marginalize them, but they belong. They belong. Because this is their workspace and what they're contributing. And Flamy talks a lot about this, about the importance of representation, visibility. Flamy's like, I want to continue to be in Christian spaces because I want to take up physical space and say, I am here, I belong here, so that queer kids coming up see me in the space and know that you exist. You exist. Like you and kids don't know that. And they think, well, if I don't and can't exist, and you see what happens as a result. And so Flamy's like, it's so important that kids like Flamy would say, kids like I was growing up, feeling completely out of place, feeling completely confused and upside down, and like I make no sense, and I'm like a unicorn, I'm like Bigfoot. I can't be real. I can't be all the complication I hold in my physical body, and I feel the pain in my physical body of holding it all together in this space. I need those kids to see me. I need them to know that that they are not alone, that there are these people in this space doing this. And so it's been very important. And so it's like, yeah, you can exclude us from your space, but that doesn't mean we don't belong. And that doesn't mean we're not contributing work into that space. So we were all like, well, let's go to the Devil Words. Like, let's go. Like, wouldn't that be fun? And so like Flamy and Semler, let's all go. And so those two got on social media and we're like, okay, we just bought tickets in section 102 or whatever. If you want to come with us to the Dove Awards, buy tickets. We're all going to go. Like, let's go together. Let's support each other. Like, it's going to be tough. So let's go together and let's be let's go as a community. And so we were like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. And it literally the just before I was like, so there's this great quote that I put in my music video that Flamy was in by Stan Mitchell. And he's a pastor here, ex-pastor.
He's my friend.
Yes, Stan is absolutely incredible. And he had this great quote. He said, if you claim to be someone's ally and you are not being hit by the stones thrown at them, you are not standing close enough. And so for me, I was like, how do I walk into the Dove Awards? First of all, I've won Dove Awards. It's kind of my community, and I'm a straight white man, and I walk in there with all the privilege in the world, all the advantage in the world. How do I surrender that? How do I walk in literally as an ally to my friends? How do I walk in like making sure that however you see my friends, you see me? I don't want to make no mistake about who I am in this room right now. I'm not one of you. I'm one of them. And so, and I was talking to Flamy about it. I was like, Flamy, what are you wearing to the Doves? And obviously I knew Flamy was going to look amazing, and
of course.
And what should I wear? Like, are we going kind of fancy? Are we going? And Flamy was like, oh, well, you should for sure wear one of the dresses that you wore in your photo shoot for your album. Because first of all, you looked amazing. And I mean, why would that's definitely, and I was like, oh my God, that's of course. And so my wife, who is my stylist, who helped me and with the leggings and the shoes, and it was important. You want to? It's
a deal.
Yeah, I have some pearls. I wanted to, and so we went to the Doves, and so I was not in drag because I wasn't. I've been in drag, but I was not in drag that day. I was just wearing a dress, and Flamy was obviously gorgeous. Semler was there, and a contingency of people came from all over the country. Probably more than a dozen people showed up there. We met out front. We went in. We were not looking for trouble. We love Christian music. I mean, like, we grew up on it. It's nostalgic. Yeah. We make it, arguably. We wanted to be there. We were not there to cause trouble. We were there to just be there, to as Flamy said, to physically take up space, to represent physically in the room. And so we went. It was pretty non-eventful. We didn't have real trouble. Like, no one really gave us any trouble or anything. If anything, there were people from the floor coming up when they heard that Flamy Grant was in the building. We had some mutual friends who were down there, some allies in the industry, who people were coming to those people and saying, hey, I heard Flamy Grant is here in Similar shit. Can you take me up and introduce me? So people were coming up to get selfies with Similar and Flamy, and then go back down to the floor and go get their Dove Awards. And
sure.
And so anyways, and we didn't, I mean, I guess we saw it as, it was fun to us, and it felt right because those are our colleagues. That is our workspace. That is where we belong, whatever they say. And it sure did raise a stink about it. So we posted the next day about how we'd gone to the Dove Awards. It was amazing. And, then we had, John Cooper, and we had Matt Walsh, and we had just a lot of folks very upset about this. And here's what's interesting. They were mostly, and I would love to process this with you very briefly, because they were mostly upset with me. And I think the reason was a lot of these men with these platforms, they see a drag queen, they see, Similar, who's a queer non-binary artist.
Yeah.
And then they see me.
Yeah. I know.
And I know this narrative. And I think they saw what I did, because none of them really got that upset about Flamy or Similar.
No, they see that as a reversal and a betrayal.
A betrayal.
I remember one time when Rachel Held Evans,
yes,
which she was still with us, told me, because I went through the whole thing publicly too, around the queer community, same space. And I remember asking her one time, like, why am I getting different treatment than other allies? And I don't understand. And she said, the evangelical community really has a tolerance baked in for some reason for folks that come into the zeitgeist as is.
Right.
I'm queer. I'm Flamy Grant.
Right.
This is who I am and who I've been. They have no tolerance for someone who has changed their mind.
Wow.
So someone from the inside of the camp who goes through an evolution of all of it: doctrine, theology, belief, understanding, perspective.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance.
Zero.
Because we were insiders.
Yes.
We were supposed to be the poster boy and girl.
Yeah.
For the boat.
Yeah. Yes, exactly right. And I did. I sense it as like they think I have abandoned and betrayed them. They think that you should have known better. Like, you're a straight white man, or whatever they think that means, whatever they're. And so, it was interesting. And Jen, here's the thing though, here's the main reason I was glad that we were. I mean, I'm glad we were there for a lot of reasons, but one reason is because I know from 30 years in the industry, and this is important for people to hear, that so Similar was, I think, the first openly queer artist to have an album go #1 on the Christian music charts. And that happened just in the last few years. Flamy was the first drag queen for that to happen. And maybe it was the first, who knows, but the first, drag queen at the Dove Awards. I don't know some of that, but let me tell you what I do know from having been in this community for as long as I have, that Flamy and Similar were not the first two queer artists to have #1 albums and singles on the Christian music charts. It has happened so many times over the years, but two people who are closeted and people who live in tremendous fear in that space, because they know they will be immediately, and we've seen it with some artists, and some artists are very good friends and probably mutual friends, but they are immediately rejected, excluded, marginalized out. But there have been so many queer artists on that stage accepting those awards. So many. That's right. And we were not the first by a long shot. Room was full of queer artists. There were so many, and I saw them. I mean, I know these are friends. I saw them. I saw some accept awards, and so no, and so it feels like another one of those moments, those disruption moments. I feel like this is what really the whole Christian space is going through, but you can really specifically look at it in the music, the Christian music. Like, it's one of those moments where either the industry is going to evolve and adapt and realize, oh, this is already happening. These people are already here. We have countless allies already in our industry and space waiting to come up around and support these people who are all terrified to be the first. It's gonna happen. It's already happening. So either we go on a new season of possible relevance and maybe there's a whole nother, or we complain about the leaves at the top of the tall tree that we can't reach them, and we devolve into an ice cube. I mean, like, basically either you grow and change, and either you become a giraffe and you evolve and you survive, or you complain your way into the ice age and you're done. And you have those two choices. And I feel the Christian space, be it in progressive Christian churches or communities, be it in the way that the queer community has taken a real ownership of the spiritual space and said, like, nah, like, this is our space too. And, like, we don't even come into your space. We have we create our own space. And the work of so many mutual friends and so many beautiful folks who are doing such important work, so many important voices. In the music side, it just feels like the thing is going to erupt. And either it's going to all be over within 5 or 10 years and totally irrelevant, over, it's going to be like a ghetto, or it's going to evolve in some way and it's going to change. And I kind of don't know which way it's going to go, but I can feel the electricity in the moment, the macro evolution moment that I feel like we're in right now. And I could feel it that night. I mean, I was like, this whole thing could be very different. And it's right on the edge of it. Anyway, I have my gut feelings about how it's going to go, but it's such an important space, and it is important in the way that it pulls a lot of political and social weight around with it. And that is where it does its damage. And so it's like, it matters what happens. Right. And that's why I still really care about my friends in that space. But it was really interesting. And so, it's been, here's the deal. I've often said that I followed Jesus right into a wig and a dress. Like, when it came to me making my music video, it's like, I feel as though, just like I said about ministry before, like, this is exactly the trouble I see Jesus getting into. Now, I don't have a particular, I'm not trying to fit Jesus into a narrative at this point. I'm fascinated. I think he's a fascinating character. I do believe he existed historically. I don't think you can really, doubt that at this point. I think he was a person who did live. I think what he did in the time and the place where he did it was disruptive and pretty revolutionary in the way that he spoke out against empire, and he worked to dismantle and disrupt empire. I think and convention. I think this is exactly where he would be. I think this is exactly what he'd be doing. And I think that there are people who are still very squarely in the evangelical space who need to be open, have the imagination to imagine Jesus that way, and to imagine following him into places that are narrow, let's just say. Because I see it happening, and so.
I do too.
Yeah. So if I can contribute a little soundtrack to that, I will,
Same. Well, I'm not a welcomed member anymore of the evangelical women's leadership cabal, whatever that is. Right. I care about it because it affects people.
Absolutely.
And it's what people are hearing, and they're looking, and they're hungry, and it has an impact.
It does.
And so I too still care, but also, similar to your story at the Dove Awards, just by nature of leadership, whatever it looks like in my life, and travel and being in places, I mean, people from that community come to me all the time.
I can't imagine.
Pastors, people kind of in traditional evangelical leadership going, asking new questions. I know the cost, and that's why I'm still over here.
Yep.
Which I understand.
Yep. And Stan Mitchell, I mean, he walks churches through
Yep.
the coming out into being an affirming space
Yes.
and a safe, welcoming space. And I know, and I can't imagine, because I get some of this, I can't imagine what you get. You are probably at the bleeding edge front line of people in major positions of influence coming to someone like you and saying, what would it mean for me how would I even broach this? How would I even, and like coming to you because you've done it. Like you are squarely, you got thrown, one side to the other. But they are starting to come and they're starting to ask questions and they're starting to realize that the importance of, I think that those ethics are coming into play. And I think that people are realizing like they're seeing the extreme of response on one side and they're like, you know what? I don't relate. I don't think that's how God responds. Right. I don't, and I'm totally, and it's starting to change. I'm needing to expand my imagination to imagine God being bigger than the rigid moral structure that I have had him in for the last 50 years.
That's right.
And that could mean, it's exactly no one disrupted before Jesus did. It's like what Jesus said where he was like, okay, you've heard it said that blank, a rule that has governed your version of a religion for a century. You've heard it said, and you've lived your life on that practice. But I say unto you, and he remixed it, and he changed it, he turned it up sideways. And they were like, okay, hang on. He's like, no. You've also heard it said. And he said these were the major teachings of an understanding of a major world religion to the people practicing it. He came in and he changed it on the spot. He remixed it, he changed, he disrupted it, he deconstructed it. And he said it means something totally different. And suddenly those people were like, had to reckon with the possibility that they had completely, for thousands of years, totally misunderstood, mispracticed the entire religion. I mean, he did that. That's exactly what he did. And
real popular guy. That one.
Yeah. And so we have to imagine that we could do the same. Like, what if we have so fundamentally misunderstood this? And that's why it's never felt right to exclude and judge queer folks. Right. It's because it's not what we're meant to be doing.
It's not right.
It's not because it's not right. It's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And could we have the imagination, the moral imagination to see that and to imagine that is not only where Jesus was going, but that's where he was, that's where he went. And that is literally what he does in our space,
I tell you who that's resonant with. And then I'm like, good Lord, I'm going to have to, I'm 30 minutes past what the time I asked you for.
I'm so sorry.
And you're going to go off into your life because you have one life. But I tell you what's, this is resonant and clear for the next generation.
Yeah.
So
100%.
As you are looking at the cracks in the machine, and they're everywhere.
Yes.
I'm watching this next generation press hard on those cracks.
Yes. They only see possibility and spark. Like we see foundation and crack. They see spark and possibility.
They do. And it's exciting to watch. I've learned a lot from this next wave.
That's right.
And they just won't have it.
Yes.
They won't have any of this. They won't have the bigotry. They won't have the homophobia. They just, they'll have none of it.
Yeah.
So
there is no version of this spirituality. Hopeful. Yeah. That includes that. Not having it. Yeah.
Not having it. Okay.
Love that.
Thank you for staying on this.
Oh, thank you for spending the time
with me way longer than I asked you to.
Not at all. We could do the whole day.
We could
do a telethon.
This could be a whole series.
Let's start raising money. Stay on all day.
Christian marketing. Listen, it does work.
Oh, it works. Yeah. I mean, it put Flamy Grant right at the top of the charts. So it works.
I mean, I'm so excited to put this conversation in my community. Will you just remind everybody where to find you, where to find your most recent work from the Jesus hypothesis and even just where you're at right now?
Yes. Yeah. So it's easy. It's DerekWebb. So my website, any social media, I'm just at Derek Webb. My stuff's all everywhere you'd go looking for it. So if you go to Spotify and put my name in, you go looking for Jesus Hypothesis, that's the new record. That's always the thing you think is the best thing you've done. I mean, hopefully you think your newest thing. And so that's the new record. You can also, I would definitely encourage people again to go find Flamy Grant, go find Similar, go find Maddie Zom, go find, there are so many artists making, and these are the young, this is the next generation you're talking about. and they presume it should and it should be and will be this way. It must and shall be this way, in fact. And so go and find all this music. But yeah, so everywhere you go looking for me, that's where you'll find me. And I would love for folks to, come and check out the music and everything.
We'll close on this. This is a lyric off one of your songs on the new album. Maybe black sheep are not lost. Oh, they're just pioneers, just brave enough to wander off and find what's past our fears. So good. Beautiful. You're an incredible artist and you're so talented. And I absolutely respect and admire your commitment to what is true and good and right. Come what may, just whatever personal loss that has incurred for you, which is substantial. I admire your consistency to stay the course, and it's going to matter. It matters now. It matters now.
Well, thank you for that.
Well done.
And I hope you know that like you could be saying every bit of this into a mirror. Because our stories are similar enough.
They are.
That every bit of that is true about what you have done and are doing and how much it matters. And to the people who are not finding camaraderie, or not finding community, or not finding, I mean, like, and so that is the reason I do it. I know that's the reason you do it at this point.
We're out here.
Yeah. Full-time vocational ministry.
I did not expect to hear you say that today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys. Lot to chew on there. Lot. And I'm so grateful for that conversation. If you go over to the jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, not only will I have this episode and the show notes, but I will put links to literally everything Derek just said. His stuff, Flamy Grant stuff, all the artists that he mentioned, the places to find and follow them. And you'll be the better for it, right? Thank you for being such a great community. Thank you for being with us in this particular series, Facing Your Fears. We look forward to all your feedback and we pay attention to all of it. So whether that's like in reviews and ratings and subscriptions, of course, your subscriptions tell us what we need to know that you're here for it. Or the comments that you put on socials when we post each episode, we listen. So thank you for your feedback. And thank you. If you loved this episode as much as I did, share it. Share it. This is one way to sort of bring our worlds into what I think is a really important space of spiritual examination. So more to come in this awesome series, you guys. And I look forward to each one so very much. If you've missed any, go back and pick them up wherever you subscribe to the show. So, all right, you guys, on behalf of our whole team, we sure love you. See you next week.